So our next speaker has been at the forefront of Earth mysteries for many years. He was involved in one of the founders of the Dragon Project. He's currently one of the founding editors of Time and Mind, which is the new academic journal. It's been out for a year or so. And today he's doing two talks. Later on he's talking about his brand new research, which is sacred geography. But now he's going to present his research on archaeoacoustics, or sound at sacred sites. So please give a warm welcome to Paul Devereux.
Thank you very much. Just to warn you, we had a technical problem at the outset here, so I'm using a machine I don't normally use, so just hope that everything works well. I hate technology. Okay, sound at sacred place, there's a big word for it. It's called archaeoacoustics, and it just simply means that archaeologists go to ancient places to listen as well as to look, we hope. It took a long while coming. It took a long while for people to, archaeologists at any rate, to realize ancient people had ears and that there'll be a sound component to many archaeological sites. And so what I thought we'd do is just look at some of the things we've been looking at. And the first thing is, what natural sounds occur at these ancient sacred places? Well, a key one we'll look at a few examples of, are lithophones. Sometimes the very rocks, the actual stones of places, make sounds, musical sounds. And they occur in a variety of circumstances. First of all, let's look at some Stone Age examples, which is a good place to start. We know that people were knocking on rock back in Paleolithic times, so we're going back 20, 30, 40,000 years, and it was found in the 1980s. Actually, it was discovered in the 19th century, but everybody forgot about it. And in the 1980s, a Dutch archaeologist, Lynn Dams, discovered calcite deposits, stalactites, stalagmites, and other formations in the Paleolithic painted caves of Spain and France. That microscopic forensic examination showed that they'd been struck time and again, and the percussion marks had been calcited over. And when these things are struck, they make a variety of sounds, like harps, like gongs, like bells, and so forth, echoing and resonating through the painted chambers. And so we know the people use sound from the rocks, from the calcite deposits. We know they were doing it in the old Stone Age, Paleolithic times, and it probably connected with the paintings in a way that nobody's really studied yet. So we began, it's pretty freaky. When you hit one of these things, you are hearing the sound that somebody else deliberately elicited from that piece of calcite 30,000 years ago. So, you know, it's quite a feeling. Some other research in the Paleolithic caves, it's a bit more controversial, but it's very interesting, is this guy, Igor Reznikov, who he's got a beautiful voice, and he's got a CD out where he uses his voice to explore Romanesque space, the space of Romanesque cathedrals. Beautiful. Le Chant de Fontenay, I think it's called, something like that. Anyway, he explored some of these painted caves with his voice, and he began to find that there were places marked, little black marks or red marks, at certain points, where he found if he stood there and intoned a chant or something, and faced a particular rock wall that had another small marking on it, that the whole thing would become alive and the reverberations would carry off through the whole cavern system. And he reckons that was deliberate marking for the human voice in these places. And he did a lot of research. In some places he noticed that the most sound reflective walls were the ones that were painted on. And there's one, for example, with a saber-toothed tiger, And he could make that saber-toothed tiger roar with the echo sound. So they may have had soundtracks as well. So, before electricity. And anyway, so other examples would include this glacial erratic on the Scottish island of Tiree. What's interesting, of course, are there's cut marks. And one of the things that's mystified people down the ages, all the archaeologists and everybody, is what these cup and ring marks mean. They're the most prominent Stone Age rock art markings in Europe. And there's no rings, but there are these hollows, these cups. And I think it was the Kilmartin group also have produced a CD called the Kilmartin Sessions. And they use a lot of old prehistoric instruments, well, you know, recasts of prehistoric instruments found in bogs and so on, Iron Age, Bronze Age instrumentation and drums, but they also use this rock on one of their tracks, so you can actually hear the lithophone. Now, perhaps the best example of Stone Age music, maybe, are the blue stones of Stonehenge. And the blue stones, as I'm sure you all know, but just to be on the safe side, are the small stones here, the shorter stones. These are the sarcens that were put up quite a bit later. And the blue stones were there first and last. They were at Stonehenge, and now we think they might have been put up at an emplacement near the River Avon before they were transported up to the site that's now Stonehenge. And they've had several configurations at the Stonehenge site, but they obviously were seen to be the key stones at the site before other people came on 1,000 years later and put up other rocks. Now, petrological analysis and chemical analysis and so on have identified the source of those blue stones as being essentially, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them came from this ridge, Carn Menyn, in the Preseli Hills in southwest Wales. And they've even been able to identify certain outcrops of rocks or cairns that specific stones came from. So we've been up there over the last couple of years, on and off, not all the time, but on and off, as part of this, the Landscape and Perception Project, and it's under the auspices of the Royal College of Art, and my colleague is John Wozencroft, who is a lecturer there, but he's also, he publishes music, he has his own CD label. What our project was, is audio-visual study of this source site of the blue stones, an attempt to look and listen as if with Stone Age eyes and ears, so as to return to sensory basics, that have an art component, you see, reconstructing primary acoustic and visual perceptions by investigating topographic features and the monumental clues Neolithic people left in the selected landscapes. Because as well as this, we're also now looking at Avebury, the Avebury landscape, which is a whole different kettle of fish, and we won't go into that today. So, this is the source. It's somewhere between 150 and 200 miles away from Stonehenge, so the big question has always been, why? Well, first of all, the question was how? How did they carry these stones from Preseli to Stonehenge? And then, as I say, the next question is, why did they do it? And one of the suggestions, they're all a bit weak-kneed, the suggestions, actually, but one is that the spotted dolerite that comprises most of the Carn Menyn Ridge is known as bluestone, and you see the reason why there. And it's got these spots of flecks. The spotted part is little pieces of feldspar and quartz that are lodged in the matrix of the dolerite. And you can recognize it. It looks like it's got little warts all over it from the outside. Split a rock open, and that's what you see. So people say, well, perhaps this rock was seen as magical in some way. Well, it might have been. We think there's another reason, and you can guess what it is. Here are just a few brief shots of the Carn Menyn Ridge when you're standing there. Those rocks I showed you, they look very small, but actually when you're amongst them, they're pretty big and rugged sort of things. It's a very beautiful landscape. Those who've been up there will know that. It's usually not seen in such a golden cast of light. It's usually horizontal rain through one ear and out the other. And it can be damned. I tell you, it's a nightmare to record sound up there. Shut up, wind, you know. Okay, the clue, we think the clue, is this village name, Preseli village, Mein Clochach, which means bell stones or ringing rocks, however you want to translate it. Because the people who lived here over the centuries knew that there was a high incidence of rocks that made musical sounds up on the Preseli. And in fact, so much was this the case that for their church, they didn't have bells. They had two beautiful rocks, blue stone rocks, and they could ring them just like church bells, as you'll hear shortly. But as progress came along and the modern world hurried in, the rocks are broken up by road builders, and they said, oh, that'll make a good bit of packing for our road, and so they broke them up and put them in the road. So now they don't have ringing rocks there, but that was the clue. And a guy called Bernard Fagg made a note of this back in about 1950. And so we picked up on that, and we said, well, I wonder if the rocks do ring. Let's go up there and have a look. So that's really how the thing started. We're doing a lot of visual work there that I won't bother you with now. So that's me on the night shift, because obviously it's surprising. You're right up there, you're in the middle of nowhere, a remote Welsh landscape, and you want to record something. You think it's silent, you know, just get in out of the wind, do your thing, record. And then when you play it back, you can hear the drone of a plane somewhere in the distance. You know, in our modern world, it's very, very difficult to get free of noise. I'm sure you're all aware of that. The places I've been, like desert locations, looking at rock art and whatever I get up to, there's a few places I've been where there is real silence, and it's so loud, the silence, you can actually listen to it. And you just don't get that really anywhere in Europe, as far as I can tell. Anyway, so we were knocking on rocks and recording findings. This is John Wozencroft here. And we were marking and making notes of rocks, lithophones that we found, and we soon realized we were going to find a hell of a lot of them. I'll give you a couple of examples, and you can go on our website, which I'll give you in a minute, towards the end, if you want to hear more examples and see some of the visual stuff that we're doing as well. Now here we go, we'll see if this works. Okay, I'm going to click the sound button here. Expect when you clunk on that piece of rock, it'll make a sound like that. So hence bell stones. Now, they don't all ring bell-like. Some are like tin drums, like this monster stone here, this whole block. We've been trying to find a visual way. Oh, we can look at that rock and say, that's going to be a lithophone, and you know we can't do it. We've not found it anywhere. So we thought with this one, well, look at this one. It's got a big split in it. You hit that, and it's just a dull thud, like normal rocks should be. So we've not yet found anything visual about these things. The one thing that a lithophone has to have to work is some resonant space. And you can see these things are propped up a bit naturally in the fall of rocks, and the same here to some degree. But otherwise, there's nothing you can really notice about them.
What are you banging it with?
Oh, a little hammerstone. We've tried wood, we've done a whole range of things, and if you use wood, you get the same thing, but it's much softer, very muffled. Use a little hammerstone. I use a piece of quartz from Death Valley, till an archaeologist got hold of it. He said, let me borrow this for a minute. Clonked in, broke my lovely piece of orange quartz it was. You know, it's a collector's item. Anyway, I make do with common or garden bit of quartz now. But anyway, what's been discovered up there that nobody knows, because everyone's looked at the blue stones at Stonehenge. Very, very few people have actually studied the source. And one of the archaeologists I have has been Tim Darville, done a lot of work, and he and Wainwright, in their earlier research up there, found rock art which nobody knew existed. And you see here, there's actually 6 depressions, a little bit, you know, like the ones on the Tyree boulder, and it seems to be broken here. Anyway, the point is, we looked at that and thought, well, I wonder if it makes sound. And this is what it sounds like. Now it's fallen now. We think it probably was an upright stone, which means it would have resonated even better than now. Anyway, so there it is, and it did make sound. And the implication of this is a more academic point, but people say, okay, well, the rocks ring, so what? Well, obviously, the people who moved around Preseli, and we know it was a sacred area in prehistoric times because of all the monuments, would have known these rocks made noise. But the point here, you can actually demonstrate anybody who made those depressions in that rock would know that it rang. So we have, the big word is intentionality, the buzzword at the moment. Some people say that the rocks are brought naturally by an ice sheet in the Ice Age that moved down and came not far from here, around Frome and that area. And the people who were building Stonehenge thought, oh, that's handy. We went down and picked up these rocks and brought them up. Not many people now hold to that theory. A few do. Most of us do not. And actually, you can trace down, you can see where they've pulled rocks out. You don't have to quarry these things, really, because they're all sort of shattered rocks anyway. You can pull things out. And you can see where they carried them down off Carn Menin. And every so often you'll find a blue stone, just like you'd find at Stonehenge, that's been dropped and broken. And this is one of them, clearest one to show. And it's musical, it rings, it's a lithophone, but obviously some klutz dropped it and broke it. Oh, we can't go on with that one. Okay, we've taken a musician up there, Zev, well known, he's a pioneer of garage music and everything. And we took him up because, as John Wozencroft puts it, he can get rhythm out of anything. And this is one of his tracks that we've recorded up there. I'll only play you a little bit, because this one really goes on, but that's good, you know. Somebody with rhythmic sense. We'll need to come up for this. All from a rock, rock on rock. Okay, you can hear long versions of that on the website if you want. Okay, so that's our little project up on Carn Menin, source of the blue stones. We think that sound was at least one of the reasons that made the rocks of Preseli special. And I'll go into that in a moment. Obviously, our research will have to end here at Stonehenge and test the blue stones in situ, which may be disappointing because once things don't have resonance space and they just dug into the ground, they can't resonate much. But where the blue stones seem to have been before, this setting near the River Avon, they had an interesting structure of wood at the bottom of the stone holes. And if the stones had been put in there, they would have had resonance space and probably would have made the sounds. But we have to test this yet, and hopefully we will. It's just that English Heritage aren't keen on people coming in there and bopping their bluestones. Have to get permission. Okay, so just in passing, because this is a general thing, on Preseli, we know it was a sacred area before Stonehenge, because there's great monuments. This is Pentry Van, for example. That's Carningley, the hill, the Hill of Angels. Used to be the hangout of St. Brunach. He used to go up there and fast and commune with the angels, hence the name. But we know that from archaeological research there was Mesolithic remains before the Neolithic around there, so people went up there anyway. It's also got absolutely massive magnetic anomalies, huge anomalies, and spin compasses and do everything. But that's another story, I won't go into that here. But anyway, so we have lots and lots of monuments, dolmens like this and so forth in the area. So we know it was special. We also know that in the Neolithic, in the Stone Age, there was this habit of taking pieces of places and transferring the magic, the mana, the supernatural potency, the power to perhaps a monument was being built. Because first of all, people venerated natural places, and we'll go into that a bit this afternoon on sacred geography. And then slowly, they improved on nature, started building their own monuments. And we know, and I'll show you why this afternoon, they did it very, very cautiously. And one of the things that was widely done was take sometimes 50, 60, hundreds of miles, take a material, it could be clay, it could be rock, from a sacred natural site and transferring it and putting it into the new monument in some way or other. So pieces of places were carried around, much like medieval saints carried around the relics of saints. Same idea of the place. So we think, in our modesty, that one of the things that made these rocks super special was their sound, and probably their colour. And I should just say in passing, I won't go into it here, but there is a place on Carmenin where echo phenomena is very, very powerful. And we'll come to echoes generally. Anyway, we're still up there looking and listening when difficult to get hold of funding and weather allow. Okay, look at the same thing of these lithophones, musical rocks in North America, let's say. This is the only one I know of that's actually in a museum. It's called the Bell Rock. It's in the Bowers Museum in Santa Ana in California. And you probably can't see on this photograph, but there are indentations here. We know a little bit about the ethnography of ringing rocks in the Americas. Indians did use them in ritual, but we don't know quite how, or there's not enough information, but we know they did. And what happened with this case was that this rock was a ringing rock. It had a legend attached to it that it was a very valuable treasure underneath it. And it was in Bell Canyon. And two dipsticks went up, took this thing literally, and dug around looking for the treasure. Well, the treasure, of course, was the sound this thing made. And I mean, one thing I emphasize time and again, never take these things literally. Not a literal thing. It's always an oblique reference. Anyway, they dug around, the thing fell down, it didn't make the sound anymore. So in the 1930s, the Indians actually brought the rock down to the museum, said, will you look after it? And before they set it on this plinth, which also stops it ringing, an Indian chief guy, shaman, actually played it. And I talked to an old lady who actually heard the bell rock speaking. However, not to be daunted, we done research out on Vision Quest sites in Southern California and many other places. And here's one. It's a site called the Iron Wash in Southern California. It's in a wilderness area almost exactly on the border with Mexico, just a couple of miles north of that. And there's a Vision Quest site where braves would go, shamans would go. in order to have a vision, and they'd fast and go without sleep and so on for a few days and nights. In the center of this site is this slab of rock, about so big, well, perhaps a bit bigger, and it's got this glyph on it. And the archaeologists there say they think it's about 1,600 years old, judging by other rock art that they find and have been able to date. Now, we don't know this, but I'm pretty sure that this is the image of the spirit that inhabited that rock, because there was a great belief amongst American Indian peoples, as there is in South Africa and elsewhere, that rocks, inside rocks, behind rock faces, behind cliff faces, were the spirits of Manitous, and that some shamans would go into trance, enter in spirit through a crack in the rocks to meet with the spirits on the other side, and the spirit world on the other side of the rock surface. So the rock surface is like a membrane between this world and the spirit world. It's very widespread throughout the Americas, this particular belief. So my guess is that's what that indicates. And you notice there's a pseudopodia here that's pointing to this part of the rock. And sure as eggs, if you strike that bit of rock at that place with a little hammerstone, it makes noise. If you hit any of these things, it's a dull thud, clunk, you know. But when you hit that, hopefully, we hear this sound. Move that up a bit, please. And this is one, talking about silence earlier, this is a very silent area. And when you play that, it affects the whole landscape around. Very powerful. Spirits talking. Africa is a huge home to lithophones. It was very well developed. Here's one in Tanzania. See it? Look at it. There's the little hammerstones and things. And it's actually in the Serengeti, that one. But Nigeria, very developed ones in Nigeria, where the drummers can make sounds from rocks exactly like their talking drums that they actually make, their tribal drums. And they can do all sorts of stuff with this. There's another place on the Nile where there's a whole bunch, there's about 200 areas of rock art, and scattered around are natural boulders, so many that whole melodies can be played moving around amongst them. So pretty sophisticated stuff. This is another example in West Africa, in Burkina Faso, and it's this weird outcrop here, has musical rocks. And there's a whole tradition of these things. They call them earth stones, and they think when they make the sound, they're releasing spirits into the air. So basically the same sort of idea. Now here's an interesting one. This is speculation, but it's a good speculation. The temples, the dynastic temples down the Nile, have, of course, as we all know, these obelisks. Now these obelisks are Aswan granite. And that's not so bad when they're upriver, but further down, they had to carry them, hundreds of miles on barges or whatever. Now, at this temple, Karnak, there's a fallen obelisk, and if you strike it, even with your hand, heel of your hand, let alone anything else, when nobody's looking, it rings. It's a ringing rock. It's this granite, this resonant granite. And my thought is that each of these is a different height in different temples. And I'm wondering if each temple had its own musical note, its own natural sound. Goethe said that architecture was frozen music. And I rather suspect that might have been literally true in ancient Egypt. Some more recent work in China. We know the Chinese were big into musical rocks, into lithophones. We found this is I think about a 2,000-year-old tomb, and these are graded pieces of jade inside this emperor's tomb, and it's a xylophone, a jade xylophone. So it's orchestrated sound. And then something that's not widely known, but it'll be in my new book when it comes out in October, is Bainshi. Now, Bainshi means resonant rocks. And in Heian period China, they would make these sort of ritualized gardens, sacred geography, you see, and there were certain rocks, like this thing here, that were highly prized. Now, a weird rock that had distinctive shapes or whatever, was considered very, very powerful, and they changed hands for a lot of money because it was felt that in rock, qi, that wind, water, that thing, you know, the natural energies that flow through the geology of the earth, and through the human form and so forth, that qi was particularly powerful in these unusual rocks. And they would put these rocks up. What we've discovered is Bainshi, and that these rocks make sounds. They are lithophones. So the idea of a rock that made sound made it very strong in qi. And there was a belief that if you touched the rock or sat next to it in meditation, it would enhance your own health and your own qi balance and so forth. So there were acoustic gardens. Aha. Two main sources of these rocks. One was Stone Bell Mountain in the Kingshu Range, and you see a lot of temples there. I wonder why. And the stones from there are called Lingbi stones. Here's one example. They tend to be now used as ornamental pieces. And the other source was Tai Hu, or Lake Tai, which was actually created by a meteorite. And there's some pretty weird rocks there that make music. And so these were used in the gardens and wherever, or into houses, brought into homes. But it's in India where the use of lithophones reached its most sophisticated level. A couple of years ago, there was an Anglo-Indian archaeological team discovering and cataloguing and whatnot this rock art here in the southern Deccan. And it's Neolithic rock art. You see an animal there and stuff all over. Then a local guy comes up to them and said, "Do you know these rocks make music?" And they said, "No." And so he started bopping some of them. You can see these marks, and they thought it was just rock art. But in fact, they're ringing rocks. Now, very interesting, not that far away of this particular spot. So we're talking about, 2,000-3,000 BC, those marked, rock-arted rocks. But not so far away, in Vijayanagara, or Hampi, there are many temples. It was a ritual, ceremonial city. And there are rocks there, solid pieces of rock that have been fashioned into these fine columns. And they're musical. They make music. They're very sophisticated. And I do this. I'm going to play some music. It's not from here, but it's classical raga music. And in this particular temple, another piece of rock cut into columns. And when you play the columns, this is what the bell says. Gentle taps on the cluster of columns hewn out of a single piece of rock can produce the keynotes of Indian classical music. You can hear the 7 basic notes come like a wave, as it were, from the stone pieces. Hardly anybody knows the intricacies of how these were constructed to resonate at a certain frequency. A single piece of rock, think of that, never needs retuning, and you just touch it, and all the basic notes of classical Indian music. So I think in some cases, and we'll see this visually this afternoon, But in some cases, I think it was the rocks of the earth that actually informed the iconography and perhaps the music of human beings who lived in those landscapes. So the earth, in that sense, really did speak to the people. Another example of a rocky temple is here, Meenakshi. And even the tourist people who got onto it, it's a tourist advert, the biggest musical instrument in the world, and these columns also are lithophones. Better than that, apparently, is that when the priest comes, he can intone certain chants and sets these things all resonating. So the whole hall goes. So it's a communication. I'll come back to that in another way. Anyway, basic point is that there was a lot of sophistication from the Stone Age right through to... These things are about 7th century AD. Now, that piece of interesting graphics comes because we've transferred stuff from one machine to another because of the technical hitch. But anyway, other sounds from rocks. Here's an example. It's the Petroglyph rock in Petroglyph Provincial Park in Ontario. And it's got about 900 carvings on it. It's a sloping piece of marble, natural bedrock marble. And there are other pieces around, don't have rock art on, but this one is plastered with it. And we wondered why. And nobody's ever come up with an explanation, but we discovered that this crack here, this fissure, is about 5 meters deep, 20 feet deep. And at random times, groundwater runs along the bottom of the fissure, and it sends out sounds that sound like whispering human voices. And therefore, the idea of there being spirits in the rock would be profoundly demonstrated here. And so we think this probably was an oracle site or something of that nature, and became so very important. And I published a little piece, I think, in Fortune Times about this a couple of years ago. And an Indian elder contacted me eventually, and he said, well, you're the first white person, he said, who's actually mentioned this. He said, we've known it all the time, but we never told anybody. So I have been invited to conduct a ritual there, but I don't quite know what it entails, so I'll tread carefully on that one. Another type of sound is the blowing stone, not so far from here, at the Uffington White Horse. Not now in its original position, but it comes from not far away. And if you blow in a certain hole on this chunk of rock, it sounds a bit like this. You may snigger. You may think it is a megalithic root noise. Think of it in another light. Think of it as the call of an elk or a stag. Hear that again in that light. We tested it in Sweden, and we were assured it is the sound of an elk. So maybe something to do with hunting magic or whatever. Echoes, yes, is another type of sound, natural sound at sacred places. This one of my favourite sites, damn difficult to get to, is the White Shaman Cave on the Texas-Mexico border, alongside the Rio Grande and the Pasos River. It's called White Shaman. It was discovered in 1951, and it's called the White Shaman because of this figure here, which is about 5 feet tall, apparently ascending out of a similar shape that's dark. These rock art paintings are about 4,000 years old, and they have been found to be basically based on the visions of peyote, the mind-altering cactus, which grows in the area. And one of the archaeologists there, who was an artist, Caroline Boyd, and she has become an archaeologist because she said nobody would listen to her till she got her degrees in archaeology. And she's really the ranking expert on these, and she's analysed the patterns and the shapes and so on, and found that they are echoed in Huishol Indian textiles, and the Huishol Indians use peyote as their sacrament. And anyway, so it's thought that this is probably a 4,000-year-old rendering of the out-of-body experience, the shaman going out in spirit. What's interesting from an acoustic point of view, though, is that if you can stand here, it's very tricky, and shout, use your voice, not hand claps or whatever, but your voice at that particular panel, which is flattened, you can't tell here, but it is flattened, the echoes are tremendous, and they go down the canyon beneath the rock shelter. You can hear the first echo, and then hear the second echo, and then the third echo, and then the fourth echo, fifth echo, all the way through the canyon. It sounds like the canyon is filled with spirit, ever so powerful. But there's other weird things acoustically about this. This is looking out from the rock shelter across this river. That's the other side of the canyon. And if you just talk in a normal conversational voice, you can hear every word on the other side of the canyon. It broadcasts sound. And they did one experiment, I was told, where they had a group of Indians who drummed inside White Shaman Shelter, and the sound was broadcast so powerfully that it stopped traffic on that highway. You see it there? About a mile away, and when you drive over that and drive along, just flat, desert, there's nothing around, sort of arid landscape. And people heard this weird drumming sound and got out and tried to figure out what it was, where it was coming from. They had no idea that it was about this cave, of course. So, very powerful, Stone Age radio. Now, another echo phenomenon place, Mazinor Rock is this cliff face running along here. It rises out of Mazinor Lake, said to be the deepest in Ontario. Haven't tested that, but that's what they say. And it's in Bon Echo Provincial Park. Gives a clue. Bon Echo, because the echo capacity of this rock face is quite remarkable, very noteworthy. And in the summer, they run boat trips down here and shout and make noises so that you can hear the Bon Echoes. But also there are patches of rock art, about 200 panels, just above the water line. And it's these places where rock face meet water that are said to be especially powerful for Manitous. Manitous live particularly behind the rock in those places. It also happens acoustically. That's a very powerful flat surface of water, vertical rock face. They're very powerful for echoes. And as I say, it's about 200, and they cluster where the echoes are strongest. And the people here, the Ojibwa people and the ancestral Algonquin people, we know had a very powerful tradition of Manitous living in the rock. And the shamans would go, as I say, into the rocks to collect rock medicine and bring it out, and so forth. So, pretty sure that echoes are involved with that. Hello? We're not moving. Oh, there we are. Okay, another way. Oh, blimey, I've gone bonkers now. I knew we'd have trouble. The other way of exploring archaeoacoustics is to take instrumentation in to a site and saturate it with sound, usually wide spectrum sound, pink noise, white noise, whatever. And these people, Aaron Watson and colleague, then from Reading University, have done a lot of work mapping the way sound behaves in Stonehenge and elsewhere. Very interesting stuff. What we did with an Anglo-American group, ICRL, is that we went around a range, pretty much a random range, of Neolithic chambered monuments, and one Iron Age monument actually as well, and just tried to find out what the first natural resonance of the chambers were. And we toddled all over, and we ended up here in Newgrange in Ireland. And we found a particular frequency that has regional brain effects. Now, I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to go into that, but it affects the frontal lobes in the theta range. I have written about this, and I'll show you where you can get hold of the information if you want it. We also, during the metageum of, not last year, the year before, wasn't it? We did some acoustic work in the Halsaflini hypergeum in Malta, and we put out sound and listened to the echoes, and computer here was pulling in stuff with a high-tech kid in there, and we pointed out it was very damp in there to him. It's very humid down in this. What it is, if you don't know, incidentally, it's a 3-story subterranean structure. It goes down 3 floors, as it were, and it's hand-carved out of the living rock. So it's a built environment under the ground. It's pretty weird. It's Neolithic, and some parts are left very rough and ready, and others, like you see here, beautifully finished, like the facade of a temple, the temples that are up on the surface in Malta. This is called the Holy of Holies, and this beautiful facade. But if you go through there, there's a big drop, and beyond it is just a roughly hewn hollow, not finished at all. It's just a hollow. Nobody knows why. Anyway, we did some sound things, and we were picking up echoes from an incident sound 27, 30 seconds later. Boom, 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 boom. All the way through the whole cavern system. Amazing. But anyway, our whiz kid wouldn't listen to us, saying, well, shall we pack it up now, because the damp will get in the computer and everything. He was so fascinated by it all that he carried on till the whole thing just packed in. The moisture did get in. And so we weren't able to complete our acoustic survey, and there's so much data, even in the few hours we had, that they're still trying to pull out the stuff with finding algorithms or something. Anyway, one of the places we of course recorded was this thing here, which is sometimes called the voice tube. It's in a chamber of this thing known as the oracle chamber, because it is particularly powerful acoustically. It's a niche. Just goes back a little way, but if you speak into it, the resonance is remarkable. So we looked at that. But there was a sort of side bonus here, just to say, I'll just play a clip from Jennifer Berezon's CD, Returning, which I would recommend if you haven't got it. And this is what the human voice sounds like in this environment. Just a few seconds worth. So you can hear the resonance carrying on from that. Anyway, the side... hello? The side benefit from this, this is the oracle chamber. It's an old photograph, actually. It was filled up with earth to that line there. There are a number of niches, but the voice tube niche is here, just partially. But on the roof, in red ochre, is this Neolithic painting. And this looks like you go in this end, this is over that curved roof. You go in, ba-dum, 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 and you come to the voice tube in the oracle chamber. And you'll see that the rock art stops, literally stops there. Now, it's hardly been mentioned, incredibly, this piece. You don't have that much Neolithic painting, but it's hardly mentioned in the literature. People say, oh, well, it was some sort of Neolithic tree of life or something. And it may well be a tree of life, but I think it actually is something else. And the only reason I thought this is because we were doing acoustic work then. I just looked up at it and I thought, oh, yeah. The so-called fruit get bigger and bigger and bigger as they get here, then it stops here. There's debate about what this niche is, most archaeologists being a bit conservative with a small c, possibly a big C as well, but anyway. They used to say that it's just an accident, that the fact that it's acoustic, powerfully acoustic, and probably it was a niche for a figurine or something. Well, it may have been all those things, but I don't think there are any accidents. If you're digging 3 floors down under the ground, you've a pretty clear idea what you want to do. So these get bigger and bigger. So now, see if I can convince you. That's what it looks like when you look up. And so it is, I mean, it could easily be a tree of life, but I think it's symbolic of sound and amplitude. Because as I say, these things get bigger and bigger, right, as we come up. And there it is, there's the niche. And the fact that it stops at the niche, I think, is interesting. But these bigger and bigger fruit, if you look really carefully, the fruit go on inside, see? So I think that's an acoustic notation, if you like. Just a guess, but, you know. If you want to read more about that, this is Time and Mind. I mentioned this to you. Down at the bookstall downstairs, you can pick up free cards about it. You can actually get on the original. We're in our 3rd year now, and what we're trying to do, we are the, if you like, a sort of a spy in the camp. We took us 4 years to get clearance academically before we could start publishing this, which we did. It's all kosher. And they are serious papers for people who take their Earth mysteries seriously. They want to make sure they're dealing with new research that's properly recorded, and you can go back and it's not just somebody's idea for a workshop or whatever. But it's worth reading because this account is in there. A lot of acoustic stuff in this particular issue, which you can go online and you can get it free of charge. See that, and it's very cheap anyway. The annual subscription. But there's stuff in there about the curved rock that speaks, which is this rock in Chaco Canyon in New Mexico that was left by the Anasazi and which projects sound quite remarkably and so forth. All acoustically engineered, you know, real proper stuff. So I would recommend it to anybody who really wants to really get into the nitty-gritty of stuff and know what the latest thinking is. Is there any more? Oh yeah, finally then, to finish off, a cultural appendix. I didn't know what else to call it, but a few loose bits and pieces. Tuvan folk singing, it comes from an autonomous republic within the Russian Federation. And these people have mastered the technology of echoes. And now they go on the world music tours and they play on stage and whatever. But the origins of Tuvan throat music is to do with speaking with the landscape. And they produce resonant sounds, I'm sure you all know this, in the throat and in the mouth and in the nasal cavities and so on. And they produce this rather weird, a bit like Tibetan chanting, but a bit different. And they produce this sound out of their own bodies. And one ethnographer reports one of the master Tuvan singers, this was a few decades ago, he'd go into a cave and he would move around, making whatever sounds, until he could pick up the exact perfect resonance. And then he'd sit there and he'd enchant for a bit and then he'd get up and go away again. So the ethnographer trying to find out why. And what he turned out to be, come back another day or later that day, not only the exact place for the perfect resonance, but also the temperature had to be just right. And then he'd start his chanting. Same thing in front of cliff faces and so on. And the master singer told him, he said, what it is, he said, we want the earth to sing back to us. It was, the whole idea of this was originally to behold a conversation with the landscape, with the rocks, within the caverns and so on. And only now, in recent years, really, has it become a standalone musical phenomenon. But our origin was to speak to the landscape and have it speak back. And I think we look at things like that when we're trying to understand the Stone Age stuff and so forth. Another just example, there's a lot of cultural stuff here with acoustics, but if you take an ayahuasquero or paye or whatever you want to call them, the shaman in, say, the Amazon who conducts ayahuasca sessions, they have particular sounds that they make. It's the same with Mexican Indian shamans and so on. They may use a leaf rattle like this. So you're spacing out, and they will go shh, 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 shh. They'll have a certain soft rhythm going. Or they beat their own bodies, very much like the two band people, only they do it percussively and make sounds out of their own body. And sometimes you've turned into, let's say, an eagle, and and you're in a visionary state, very realistic. But damn it, you can't get off the ground. You know, I know I can fly, I know I can fly. And so suddenly, these shamans who apparently can get inside your vision, inside your mind, and they'll come along and then they'll start whistling or shaking their thing. And it's like the wind beneath your wings, if you like, and it just raises you up and you can fly away. So these guys walk around in other people's consciousness. In itself, spooky. In itself, raises big questions about our modern Western models of what mind is. It's a long way from fMRI, let me tell you. So that's cultural appendix. Was there anything else? Oh yeah, more adverts. Downstairs, I've got some copies of this book, now no longer generally available through my website, or as I say, you can pick it up here for a song. If you want to go on to the stuff on Preseli, the audio-visual stuff, that's the website. It's a big website. Look at some of the still pictures, because it's a bit like Harry Potter. If you look at some of the pictures, they slowly move. Oh, they're moving. And as I've mentioned this, the Time of Mind, you can pick up a card down there, or you can go directly online to bergpublishers.com, whatever, and you can work your way to the Time and Mind. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you very much.